Welcome back to my channel, Famous and Fabulous. Why did Johnny Carson live his final years completely alone? He was America's king of late-night TV, loved by millions of people. In 1992, 50 million people watched his last episode. But after that final show, he just disappeared. No interviews, no comebacks, and almost no time in public at all. So why did the most famous man on TV disappear and live completely alone? That's the mystery we're going to figure out. When Johnny died on January 23, 2005, there was no public memorial service. From the 1980s until he died in 2005, Johnny Carson lived in his Malibu house. He saw fewer than 20 people per year outside his close family. You might wonder how this was possible, since Johnny was the host of NBC's The Tonight Show from 1962 to 1992. That's 30 years of always being in the spotlight. How could he make sure that he didn't spend time with people? Especially when during those years, Johnny interviewed over 7,000 guests and had done about 4,131 episodes. No wonder Johnny Carson became the most famous face on television during that time. He was described as being naturally charming and funny, but not many people knew this. That wasn't the real Johnny, or was it? His producer, Peter Lassalle, noticed something strange. He realized Johnny was wearing a mask of being a charming, outgoing person. Peter saw Johnny switch from being an energetic, charming man to saying boring sentences while missing his couch at home. To Johnny, being a TV host was just a job he had to do, and there was a reason for this, which we'll tell you soon. So, anytime the cameras stopped recording, Johnny was already looking for ways to avoid people and leave the studio. Small talk. He didn't even want to talk to any of the crew members or even his co-workers. Johnny would rather be alone doing crossword puzzles than do that. What about talking to fans? That was never going to happen. Johnny was so determined to avoid people that he told NBC to make his own private exit just for him. He would come back each night, but the routine stayed the same. There were times when his routine got interrupted, like when he got invited to industry events. Johnny treated those events like they were chores. He avoided them when he could, and when he couldn't, he went, but didn't want to. In a year, Johnny would only go to around 12 industry events, while his competitor MV Griffin went to around 45 or more each year. Johnny had an excuse for not going to those Hollywood events. He would say parties are for outgoing people and preferred to go home to talk to his dog, not his wife. What a guy! Could this be the reason why Johnny had 4 marriages? Was he ignoring the emotional needs of the women he married before he disappeared from the public and after? His routine was simple. He would play tennis alone or read astronomy magazine by himself. In the afternoon, he would have short phone calls to Jay Leno to swap jokes. Their conversations were controlled and professional. Even when he had visitors like director Howard Smith, they would have a short chat before Johnny asked them to stay quiet and watch the stars. Smith said Johnny was happy, but was that happiness? Or was Johnny's past still bothering him even during the last days of his life? What is Johnny's past? You'll see what we mean soon. In the evenings, Johnny always ate at home, but it wasn't like he didn't get invited for dinner outside his home. His 4th wife, Alexis Mass, said they had quiet dinners, no guests unless family. She said Johnny loved that silence. Did he really, or was he being selfish? Rather than talk to her, Johnny would rather read, play tennis alone, or just watch the ocean. Johnny was too focused on himself and not the needs of his wife and those around him. But Johnny also was a giving man. He privately, and without telling anyone, wrote out millions of dollars in checks to help charities and strangers. However, how could this same man hardly give his wife attention? But it wasn't just the women he married he did this to. As you'll see, it isn't really surprising that Johnny turned out this way. When he was young, he wasn't like other kids. While neighborhood children played baseball and chased each other through Iowa cornfields, he stayed inside reading comics or practicing card tricks from a mail-order magic kit he'd begged for. At age 14, he usually felt stomach-knotting fear before talking to people. It was so bad that when guests came to visit, he would hide behind his family's tall piano. Sometimes he would hide in the shadows and shuffle playing cards, all to avoid guests. He had to, because if he got too noticed and wasn't perfect, he could get in trouble. His mother, Ruth, demanded perfection from him and his brothers and sisters. However, she didn't think John would be able to do anything close to perfect. Imagine making a child feel like they can't be good enough. She even thought as a boy Johnny would always be dirty, and she didn't like dirt. Imagine that. Ruth was harsh. She didn't act like a mother, but like a grumpy captain of a warship. Love in her household was hard to get, and she didn't give much of it. Compliments and warmth had to be earned. Even when he became successful as a late-night TV host, there were reports that she made fun of him. Could these reports be true? Did she hate her own son? When Johnny got his cards, he practiced his entertainment skills on family members with card tricks. He would follow them around and ask them to pick a card. He then decided to perform in front of people, even though he was shy. His mother supported him and made him a cape for his first performance in front of the local Kiwanis club. Eventually, he started performing as the great Carson Sony at age 14 and was paid $3 a show. Johnny realized something. The audience loved him. The warmth he felt was different from the pressure he felt from his mother. When his mother died in October 1985 at 84 years old, he didn't cry for her. Instead, what he told his friends was, "The wicked witch is dead." Johnny refused to go to the funeral. But however, what happened next changed what he thought about his mom. In her home, Johnny made a discovery. It turned out that inside her home, she kept a large box filled with newspaper clippings from his entire career. Every article, every review, every mention. The woman who never showed him love had been his biggest fan all along, collecting proof of his success in secret. Johnny took that box and kept it in his bedroom closet for the rest of his life. Did he regret not going to his mom's funeral? Could he have forgiven her for his childhood at that moment? Living in that kind of broken home destroyed Johnny's view of people. He would rather avoid them than mess up talking to them and get yelled at. But deep inside, Johnny wanted to be loved. He enjoyed the attention he got from doing card tricks for people. He decided he wanted to be a magician. Some reports say his mother meanly discouraged him. These reports may not be true because she secretly kept the large box we talked about before that had clippings of articles about his success. Or did she discourage him first and change her mind later? Or maybe she didn't want him to be a magician and was fine with everything else. While he was in the United States Navy, he discovered something about himself. He could actually do it. In the Navy, Johnny showed the ability to fight and win during physical combat. He was an amateur boxer in the Navy, and out of his 16 fights, he only lost one. So, US Secretary of the Navy, James V. Forrestal, asked him if he wanted to stay in the Navy, but Johnny said no and told him he wanted to be a magician instead. Forrestal must have been shocked. So, he asked that Johnny perform a trick for him. But Johnny didn't just wish to become a magician. He had the skills for it. Johnny was able to amuse and entertain Forrestal. From that experience, Johnny realized that if he could entertain and amuse someone as grumpy and sophisticated as Forrestal, he could entertain anyone. Then he made a decision. He wasn't going to be a magician anymore. He was going to be a comedy writer. To do this, when he went to the University of Nebraska in 1946, he studied journalism. Writing comedy would let him entertain without really talking to people. However, some months into his program, Johnny switched his classes to speech and drama. Why the change of heart? Johnny didn't want to write comedy anymore. He decided he was going to be a radio performer instead. There was a reason for this too. Johnny had started to perform magic tricks for money. He made about $25 per show, and he wanted a career that would give him a feeling close to that. Being a radio performer seemed like the best choice. By 1949, he was done with college, but he wouldn't become a radio performer. However, his college training prepared him for what he would eventually be, a TV host. And after failing and not giving up, Johnny finally got his show on NBC in 1962. Why would a shy and quiet person choose to be a late-night TV host? Remember his weird idea of love since he got the love and warmth he wished he got in his childhood from audiences. Johnny was hooked, but there was a problem. He was unable or didn't want to try getting that love from the women he married. He didn't even look for it from his 3 sons from his first marriage. Just like his mother did to him, Johnny treated his sons with a cool, distant coldness. How sad. Johnny became the very thing he hated. However, it wasn't that he didn't care about them. They are even among the reasons Johnny doesn't want to be in the public. Stick around and see what we mean. There was another reason Johnny chose to be a TV host. The format of The Tonight Show let Johnny have the illusion of talking to people. The show became his therapy, a way to escape the trauma of his childhood. The talk show was in a controlled environment. The conversations were scripted, and the outcomes were predictable. Johnny simply wanted to have his cake and eat it too, to be with people while not really being with them. However, despite this, Johnny planned to leave everything behind when the time was right. The show stopped being therapy as his fame grew, and that fame got in the way of the quietness off camera that Johnny wanted. That fame even cost him everything, and you'll soon see on the set of his show. He didn't mind the cameras, but off it he wanted total privacy, which fans wouldn't give him. However, it seemed like everything he did was because of his childhood, which was like the blueprint for everything that happened in his adult life. That childhood really wasn't one he would like to remember. Also, it wasn't the only reason Johnny lived his final years alone. Johnny was sick, but this part of him was something he wanted to keep from the world. In September 2002, 2 years before his death, Johnny's representative kept saying he was in good health. Even Johnny himself told CBS News that he was fine when tabloids kept saying he wasn't. But Johnny wasn't fine, and he was the one that caused his illness himself. Let us explain. While it wasn't clear when Johnny started to smoke, one thing was clear. John loved to smoke, or did he? In the 1960s, Johnny smoked everywhere, even on live television. At the time, it was allowed, and Johnny took full advantage of it, or maybe abused it. Johnny was a chain smoker, and NBC archives showed the shocking numbers. Johnny likely smoked 40 to 60 cigarettes every single day. That's 3 full packs during high-stress tapings. Between monologues and commercial breaks, Johnny's lungs were getting destroyed in real time, while millions of Americans watched him make it look cool. But here's what they didn't see. Johnny's chest coughs weren't going away. Doctors warned him about the cough, but Johnny didn't stop smoking. It wasn't that he didn't want to, he couldn't. He was addicted and was too ashamed to admit it. He even privately told loved ones that the cigarettes were killing him. Yet, he continued smoking cigarettes all day when he had the chance. With each cigarette he smoked, he felt guilty, and he admitted in the late 1970s that he should have gotten help. If he did, maybe he would still be alive now. Johnny's lungs started to have holes and became unable to take in oxygen the way they're supposed to. Still, he kept smoking and kept performing while his body screamed for help. Why would someone so smart ignore such obvious danger? Johnny's lung capacity continued to get smaller, and at some point it was 60%. Working became more difficult for him. Crowded rooms became hard to breathe in for him. And the king of wit and fast responses started to gasp for breath after being in a crowd. But it wasn't just crowded rooms that gave him problems. Stairs became his enemies, and elevators felt like they were closing in on him. Something was really wrong. And then in 1991, that danger could no longer be ignored. Johnny's cough and that constant shortness of breath wasn't normal. In 1991, doctors told him he had emphysema. Could this diagnosis be why Johnny chose to retire from NBC in 1992? People felt that his retirement was shocking and that Johnny still had much to give. But did he? Now it made perfect sense. Johnny was leaving before his body failed on national television. Before America watched him gasp for air, between jokes, the emphysema forced him to choose between retirement with dignity or public embarrassment by suffocation. Johnny hated to be seen gasping for breath. It could be part of the reason he even avoided those Hollywood parties. He didn't want to be in a crowd and let them see him struggle. So retirement sounded great. Unfortunately, it was too late. By 1993, walking 100 yards caused shortness of breath so bad he'd have to stop and recover. His lung capacity continued to get smaller, and it reached around 35 to 40% by 2004. Most people at that level need extra oxygen just to sit upright. But Johnny, reports said he refused extra oxygen. Some even said he kept smoking. What was Johnny thinking? He even had a terrible incident that should have made him want to stop smoking in 1995. But Johnny continued, likely because of his addiction and because he didn't like to be seen as weak. Could this be another traumatic response to the kind of childhood he had? So, despite his failing health, Johnny kept pretending that he was fine. But between 1999 and 2002, he was in the hospital for heart attacks and pneumonia problems, and it got worse. By 2004, Johnny needed 24/7 oxygen therapy. That means constant tubes in his nose, constant awareness of his death coming, constant limitation on every movement, every activity, every moment. Johnny, who kept saying he wasn't sick, admitted that he was living on borrowed time. And on January 23, 2005, that time was up. He died at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles from breathing failure caused by emphysema. The smoking he loved to hate finally killed him. However, it could be that Johnny was no longer interested in living long before then and just wanted the disease to kill him. Maybe this was why he didn't use oxygen when it could have helped him. Johnny had suffered so many losses in his life. Those losses may have made living seem like a chore to him, rather than something he would enjoy. When Johnny married his college sweetheart, Joan Walcott, in 1949, life couldn't be better. They had 3 sons together, Christopher, Rick, and Corey. And then fame arrived. But fame came with something else. Destruction. After 14 years, the marriage fell apart. The reason, Johnny confessed, he cheated on his wife and was obsessed with his work. But here's the sadder part. The divorce didn't just end a marriage. It created a wide gap between Johnny and his sons. A gap Johnny didn't fix. Because just as his first marriage ended, Johnny married Joanne Copeland, a stunning model. He didn't try to learn from the mistakes he made in his first marriage. Maybe if he had, his marriage to Joanne wouldn't have ended after 9 years. Joanne said Johnny didn't give her emotional attention and was a workaholic. Their divorce was public and it cost him $500,000. It was a huge amount, but wait till you see what his next marriage cost him. The $500,000 was a lot, but the emotional toll it took on the journey was much more. However, the emotional cost of his next marriage was much worse. Johnny married Joanna Holland in 1972, and their marriage lasted around 13 years. It was a miracle that the marriage lasted that long. Those 13 years weren't peaceful. Joanne was a socialite whose high society lifestyle clashed so badly with Johnny, who preferred to stay indoors. When their marriage ended, it nearly bankrupted Johnny both financially and emotionally. Him and Joanna fought over a $20 million settlement, and in 1985, Johnny Carson had lost over $20.5 million to divorce settlements. Still, Johnny married again, but this time had learned that he wasn't built for chaos. So he kept things simple, and in 1987, he married a woman who was very private, the complete opposite of his previous wives. She was also 26 years younger than him. He didn't exactly learn too. He would read or play tennis rather than talk to her. Maybe he wanted to but couldn't because in 1991 everything changed. That incident pushed Johnny deeper into himself. On June 21st, 1991, in Sucos, California, Rick Carson seemed to have driven off the cliff on a narrow road. His death shattered Johnny, who carried the guilt of not being close to his sons. For weeks Johnny grieved, and he never got over Rick's death. Unfortunately, the losses weren't over just yet. In 1995, Christopher, Johnny's oldest son, died at 45 years old from lung cancer because he, like his dad, was also a heavy smoker. How do you process that? How do you wake up every day knowing you modeled the behavior that killed your child? What's worse? Johnny and his last son were so distant that they rarely spoke. A lifetime of fame that brought everything except the one thing he needed, real human connection. Johnny always felt sad about the point of everything he had when he outlived two of his sons. What's the point of all this? He would ask those close to him. Really, what was the point?